discover an exotic island paradise in Bali, where birds reign supreme. And visit the lovely gardens of North Carolina's breathtaking Biltmore Estate. Join us for a magnificent World Garden Tour. Named Sans Souci, French for without worries, the 18th century palace of King Frederick the Great of Germany is located in Potsdam. The king was a great admirer of French culture, and Sans Souci's name and its design clearly reflect his inspiration. The results are often compared to France's renowned Versailles for their scale and beauty. The king used this palace and its surrounding gardens to retreat from the worries of running an empire. It was a place where he could quietly pursue his passions for philosophy and the arts. But even here, the king couldn't completely escape his duties. The 18th century was the age of enlightenment in Europe, and Sans Souci mirrored the spirit of the times. King Frederick worked very closely with French and German landscape designers to perfect his vision of an estate that reflected his compassionate style of leadership.
A royal garden like this should symbolize the idea that if the king looks after everything, every little plant and every tree and every flower, and takes care of the water and even tolerates a windmill, the peasant or the farmer, close to his royal residence, that people should get the impression Prussia as a state would be very well taken care of by the king. And this idea of Frederick being the first servant of his state, which was a motto unheard of in the 18th century, illustrates very much his philosophy and also his ideas not only about gardening but also of taking care of a country.
Sans Souci's style follows the highly decorative Rococo sense of balanced symmetry. The gardens are characterized by a series of carefully manicured lawns, or parterres, geometric plantings surrounding fountains and reflecting pools, and hedged avenues that open onto quiet, smaller-themed gardens. The most remarkable feature here at Sans Souci is its system of sculpted terraces, crowned by the palace on top. They flow downhill to the palace lawn, a large swath of grass edged with colorful floral borders of annuals and perennials. The terraces are oriented to the south and curve gently to capture full sunlight throughout the day. Trimmed laurel and yew trees stand amid the unusual banks of glass-enclosed rooms in the terrace's retaining walls. King Frederick cultivated sun-loving orange and fig trees, as well as grapevines in these individual greenhouses. During Potsdam's cold winters, the glass doors were closed to protect the delicate non-native plants, so their fruits could be enjoyed year-round at the king's table inside the palace.
So if you look at the palace, you see the green dome in the center. That is actually the domed dining room where the wine, which was grown here maybe, was even consumed. And the guests who stayed in the guest rooms and the king himself from his apartment could see the ripening grapes from, literally from their beds or from their bedrooms.
Another feature visible from the palace is the prominent staircase that leads down the terraces, shaped to call to mind the flowing costumes of 18th century dress. It directs visitors to the large fountain that stands in the center of the palace lawn. Fountains were an essential element to the 18th century Rococo garden because they symbolized wealth of life. Windmills helped pump water from the nearby river to irrigate Sans Souci's gardens and keep its fountains flowing. However, the technology of the times wasn't always sufficient to create the kind of soaring fountains that visitors see today.
In the 18th century, Frederick unfortunately would not have the water music every day. He actually had to prepare the water basin. Literally, when the carriages would come into the garden, they were kind of switched on. And Frederick better had something going after half an hour or two, that the people would not feel the lack of the sound of water in the garden so much.
Seen from the vantage point of the palace above, the lawn that surrounds the fountains was designed to resemble an elaborate oriental carpet with many colors threaded throughout. Its borders of annuals like lobelia, snapdragon, and flowering tobacco were replanted during the season to remain in a continual state of vibrant color.
If you look at the variety here, you might like the idea It's not a dominating color or just one variety, which maybe is too boring if you look at the flower bed every day and every time. So you might want also a change. Of course, you can take single plants out when they have lost their flowers and replant it with something else. So it's a flower bed which you can change and alter during the whole summer season. And if you look at this flower bed within 2 weeks' time, it's completely different from what it started, let's say, 2 weeks ago. So because some start to bloom and some are already dying or changing their color.
Statues of mythological subjects are placed along the hedged avenues that lead visitors to Sans-Souci's smaller themed gardens.
Very typical for an 18th century garden are these avenues of different size. There were some where you could actually drive in a carriage, but they're more intimate paths where you're more surrounded by nature, which are more narrow, where the hedges are very close to you. And they would actually call these little rooms, which they would create, they would actually call them rooms, chambre à parterre. And that's where they would spend the day. They would sit there, maybe even have a picnic, or an opera, an open-air performance. Typical for the Baroque and the Rococo is to spend as much time as possible in the garden, in this artificial or artful nature.
Over the years, Sans-Souci has grown and changed as different rulers came to power. Sans-Souci's Sicilian garden was added by Frederick IV, a successor to Frederick the Great, who had visited Italy and built this Mediterranean-style garden in the 19th century. The entrance to the Sicilian garden is marked by an arbored pathway. The garden is designed in the traditional Italian style. A sheltering wall surrounds the garden, which is laid out around a central pool. Beds featuring flowering myrtle, Jerusalem cherries, and African lilies, along with various spiky succulents and colorful perennials, are composed in rigid geometrical forms around the pool. Many of the plants from warmer climates, like these palm trees, are potted and placed indoors during the winter to protect them from freezes. With such magnificent gardens, it's easy to imagine where Sans-Souci gets its carefree name. This graceful green oasis simply soothes worries away. Coming up, World Garden Tour will explore an exotic garden in Bali that's literally for the birds. World Garden Tour now journeys to Bali, a tropical Indonesian island that provides a natural home for a rich abundance of plants and animals. Here in this beautiful setting, one man has built a garden aviary as a haven for some of the island's rare exotic birds.
Inspiration was actually a dream since I can think. I always had the wish to have a bird park, to have a botanical garden, and I always followed my dream somehow. I left with 16, I left Germany and traveling around Africa, South America, Philippines, and I ended up in Indonesia.
Built on land that once held rice paddies, the bird park is defined by a series of lawns and ponds. As with any proper animal preserve, it closely replicates natural habitats. These landscape spaces provide an ideal natural environment that lends itself to freedom of movement for some of the park's feathered residents.
Most of the zoos, there is a large amount of cages, and you see cages in cages, and you see the animals, but usually zoos, they don't care much for the gardens, much for the beauty of the surrounding. And I wanted to combine both of them. I want to give to the birds a really nice environment, natural habitats.
The park's vision of nature in harmony is best illustrated by its central lake. While elegant flamingos stroll along the edge of a constructed island, pelicans flock along the shore. Several lumbums, Balinese rice barns, are placed throughout the park to provide shaded habitats. The diverse collection of rare palm trees cast their shadows on the scene. Several water features throughout the garden create a refreshing ambiance. Placid ponds are home to abundant collections of water lilies and lotus flowers, like this Japanese double lotus, or this solar yellow American lotus. However, the park also features plants native to drier regions. Recreating a natural habitat for these succulents here in the cactus garden is quite a challenge because of Bali's rainy season.
They are doing not so well in this climate because it's too humid, and maybe one day we can build a special cactus area which is covered.
While plant cultivation and experimentation is important, serving as a tropical bird sanctuary is the park's primary purpose.
We have a lot of indigenous birds from Bali. We have, for example, the Bali myna. What we are trying at the moment is to save this bird and to set up a breeding program. And we are asking like different zoos and bird parks around the world for help to give us Bali myna breeding pairs they have, because we need different bloodlines also. And we hope one day we can release them again to the natural habitat if we are lucky and being supported by the Indonesian government, and they are protecting the environment and the natural habitat.
The park's proliferation of exotic birds add their jewel-tone colors to the vibrant beauty that surrounds them. The extremely rare Komodo dragons also make their home here. These large reptiles are native only to a few Indonesian islands and can grow up to 10 feet in length. Their young live in the tree canopy along with the birds of the park. For its inhabitants and visitors, the entire Bali Bird Park exudes a peaceful, calming atmosphere.
I love the scale. I love the fact that it's almost like a large Japanese garden. It's a homage to nature, but it's also a homage to excessive decorativeness. It's really bejeweled. And there's lots of ideas, but it sort of meanders around. It's incredible to see those sort of waterfalls dripping over the rarest palms and ferns and cycads, and to hear the sounds of those rare tropical birds and the monkeys and the gibbons, and all you need is a sort of, hippopotamus to come out of your consomme. It's an incredible place.
Coming up next, the Biltmore boasts 250 rooms, but that's only on the inside. World Garden Tour will visit some of the breathtaking outdoor rooms at this remarkable estate in North Carolina. World Garden Tour now travels to the Biltmore Estate in scenic North Carolina. This palatial home was built during the late 1800s by George Vanderbilt as a summer retreat for his family. Vanderbilt was a wealthy industrialist of the Gilded Age, and no expense was spared in the creation of his estate. He commissioned Frederick Law Olmsted, the renowned landscape designer who created New York Central Park, to make a fittingly impressive garden backdrop for the French chateau-styled mansion. And the grandeur of the Biltmore's interior rooms is more than matched by what lies outside. Several terraces descend from the house to the surrounding gardens. Olmsted designed these terraces to serve as outdoor rooms for guests who wanted to remain near the house. The library opens to the first outdoor room. Fragrant wisteria and trumpet creeper vines are entwined throughout the sturdy arbor that covers it. This lush canopy provides a cool, shaded area overlooking the south terrace below. The ample south terrace was designed as an ideal location for a hearty stroll or for fun and games. Its large central lawn once served as a bowling green. Visitors can enjoy spectacular views of the Blue Ridge Mountains from here. Vanderbilt's 125,000-acre estate originally extended all the way to Mount Pisgah. Today, the area is a national forest. The charming limestone tea room provides a pleasant point of destination at the terrace's furthest corner. It's another shady place to pause and contemplate the remarkable panorama of the mountain's gentle slopes. To the east of the south terrace is the Italian garden. Olmsted referred to this area as the Garden Terrace. Bordered by a hemlock hedge and stone walls, the Garden Terrace was intended as another outdoor room and is decorated with classical statues and jardinières, or large pots. Isolated benches provide a place for rest and quiet contemplation or conversation. 3 symmetrical pools grace the center of the terrace, They're surrounded by broad gravel paths and panels of carefully manicured lawn to form an ordered composition that is modeled on the Italian gardens of the 16th century Renaissance Italy. Water lilies and Egyptian lotus fill the pools, and in warm weather, the central pool is stocked with canna and ornamental grasses that were popular at the turn of the 20th century. A brief walk along a woodland path leads to one of Biltmore's hidden treasures, a 4-acre walled garden of serene color. The upper half of this enclosed garden room features patterned perennial beds of bright tulips. Although it's now a pleasure garden full of color and delicate beauty, that was not the original plan. Initially, Olmsted determined that the upper part of the walled garden should be a kitchen garden, a place for growing useful fruits and vegetables. Mr. Vanderbilt, however, had a different opinion.
Very early on, near the turn of the century, Mr. Vanderbilt, in a note to Olmsted, stated that he could get his fruits and vegetables from his farm, and he wanted a garden of ornament rather than utility. So, in order to satisfy the client, that's exactly what it became, and it remains so today.
The walled garden's beds are similar in design to an Elizabethan knot garden, a garden where plants and pathways create a very distinct geometric pattern. A progression of flowering plants provides undulating bands of vivid color throughout the year. Here, springtime tulips are in bloom. Those familiar with much of Olmsted's other work may find the formality of this garden a bit surprising, because he is best known for his devotion to natural forms.
Well, I think he had to offer Mr. Vanderbilt a package deal, so to speak. He was considered the master of naturalistic design, and the greater part of these landscaped acres around Biltmore House are very natural in style, with woodlands and meadows and little streams and pathways and that sort of thing. But I think the very grandeur of the chateau itself called for some formality.
The garden's walls are functional as well as aesthetic. They help protect delicate blossoms like these tulips from harsh weather by creating a heat-retaining microclimate.
This garden was situated where it is because of it offered more protection being in the valley rather than up on the slopes immediately below Biltmore House. And as there were many tender plants, not just fruits and vegetables, but tender flowering plants to be grown in the garden, Olmsted wanted a sense of protection by surrounding the wall in this valley.
In addition to the central carpet of blooms, distinctive borders line the edges of the perennial half of Biltmore's wall garden. One of the most interesting is this one, featuring plants that have white blooms or gray foliage, like cleome, dusty miller, astilbe, lamb's ears, and foxglove. Hollyhock, Asiatic lilies, and canna brighten another border nearby. An intricate arbor separates a section of the walled garden from the lower half.
Olmsted called it the vine-clad arbor, and in Europe, vines are grapes. Ornamental vines are creepers or climbers. So it was traditionally in a European garden would have a vine-clad arbor with grapes to provide fresh fruit, but also shade for the summer. The garden was typically in a full sun situation that flowers favored, so I think Olmsted planned that arbor as just kind of a shady retreat and a place to sit and relax and enjoy the flowers.
Discover a breathtaking surprise hidden on the other side of Biltmore's arbor when World Garden Tour returns. Garden Tour now returns to Biltmore Estate in North Carolina. The lower half of Biltmore's walled garden is completely given over to the world's favorite flower, the rose. At the peak of summer, this section of walled garden is a brilliant bouquet of color and smell, and the regal roofline of the Biltmore remains in constant view, rising high above this gorgeous ocean of roses. Nearly 2,200 roses of more than 280 different varieties cover this 1.5-acre plot. 7 gardeners care for and maintain them throughout the season. However, you don't need an entire crew of professionals to achieve similar results. Despite their finicky reputation, roses can be easy to grow, provided you follow a few simple rules. Roses require at least 6 hours of sun each day, preferably in the morning, so the light will quickly dry fungus-causing dew. When watering, soak the soil surrounding the plants instead of wetting their foliage to prevent other moisture-related diseases. Roses grow best in well-drained soil that's high in organic matter, and individual plants should be placed far enough apart to provide plenty of air circulation. With these rules combined with regular pruning, your rose bushes may match the splendor of those found here in the gardens of Biltmore. From the grandeur of Biltmore Estate's garden rooms to Bally's lush green aviary, to the remarkable Rococo stylings of Germany's Sanssouci Palace, we thank you for traveling with us and hope you'll join us again next time for another